It's funny how a family builds its own mythology. In my family, the myth was one of grim Protestant work ethic. We were the Cormacs, a name synonymous with shipping for over a century. Our story, the one polished and presented at every company gala and holiday dinner, was that our great-great-great-grandfather, a man named Alistair Cormac, arrived in the New World with nothing but a strong back and an unshakable faith. Through honest trade and shrewd investment, he built a small shipping concern that became the foundation of our family's considerable fortune. My uncle, Marcus, was the current high priest of this mythology. He ran Cormac shipping with an iron fist and a voice that could curdle milk from 50 paces. To him, the family name wasn't just a brand, it was a sacred text, and he was its sole interpreter. And then there was me. Joel. The heretic. My sin. I collected antique maps. To Marcus, and by extension, the rest of the family who orbited him like nervous moons, my passion was a source of constant weary amusement. It was a dusty, useless hobby. Still playing with your colorful little papers, Joel? He'd boom across the Thanksgiving table, his son, my cousin Leo, snickering into his napkin. When are you going to do something real? Something that builds on the legacy Alistair gave us. Leo, the golden boy, was being groomed to take over the company one day. He had an MBA from a school his father's donations had paved the way into, and the kind of easy, unearned confidence that comes from never having a single bill you couldn't hand off to someone else. My maps, my charts, my quiet little life as a freelance historical researcher, it was all a disappointment. A smudge on the pristine portrait of the Cormac family. The ridicule had become a sort of background radiation in my life, a low hum of disapproval I had learned to live with. It wasn't about revenge back then. It was just about survival. It was about finding a quiet corner of the world where their judgment couldn't reach me. That corner was usually an auction house, a dusty antique shop, or the soft glow of the lamp over my drafting table. Last week I found myself at an estate sale in a crumbling old manor house by the coast. The air smelled of salt and mothballs. Tucked away in a sea chest, beneath a pile of moldering linens, was a 17th century sea chart of the Caribbean. It was hand-drawn on vellum, the ink faded to a ghostly brown, the edges brittle. It was beautiful. I paid more than I should have, but I felt that familiar thrill, that sense of rescuing a piece of history from oblivion. Back in my small apartment, which my uncle once described as a librarian's tomb, I carefully unrolled my prize. It was expertly drafted, but something was off. The routes marked weren't the typical Spanish treasure fleet paths or the main colonial trade lines. They were erratic. Jagged lines connecting obscure coves and uninhabited islets. That night, purely out of habit, I decided to examine it under my ultraviolet lamp, a tool I use to check for modern forgeries or repairs, and that's when my world tilted on its axis. Under the flat, purple glow, the empty spaces on the chart bloomed with a ghostly greenish light. A second map, a hidden layer of information, emerged from the vellum. It wasn't written in the elegant script of a royal cartographer. The handwriting was a rough, angry scrawl. It wasn't a map of trade routes, it was a log. A captain's log, written in invisible ink. I spent the next hour hunched over the chart, my heart hammering against my ribs, deciphering the spidery script. It spoke of ambushes in the Windward Passage, of Spanish galleons taken by force, of crews divided and treasures buried. And then I saw the name, signed at the bottom of a lengthy entry detailing the scuttling of a ship called the Royal Merchant. Captain Calico Cormac, not Alistair, our true ancestor. And the final entry I managed to decipher that first night, a line that seemed to burn itself into my brain, "Rid the governor's gold is ours." The family's future is secure. The pristine reputation my uncle had spent a lifetime curating, the entire myth of our family, was a lie. Our fortune wasn't built on honest trade, it was built on piracy, and I was holding the proof. The first 24 hours after the discovery were a blur of adrenaline and disbelief. I barely slept. I kept the chart unrolled on my large work table, the black light bathing my apartment in a conspiratorial purple glow. Every time I looked at it, a new detail would leap out, a crudely drawn skull and crossbones, next to the name of an island, a notation of 10 fathoms deep off a rocky shore. A list of names under the heading sent to Davy Jones. It was horrifying, and in a strange, unsettling way, it was exhilarating. I felt a bizarre kinship with this Calico Cormac. He was the first Cormac, the real founder, and from the sound of his log, he was a man who lived by his own rules, an outcast who spat in the eye of authority. He was everything my family, in their starched shirts and their air of sanctimonious respectability, pretended not to be. He was a secret, buried and paved over with a more convenient truth. I felt like a secret, too. Then the anger started to creep in, a slow cold tide rising in my chest. I thought of every condescending remark from Uncle Marcus, every pitying look from my parents, who were so thoroughly under his thumb, every smug grin from Leo. For years they had treated me like a failure, a disappointment, for pursuing history, for loving the very dusty relics that held the actual unvarnished truth of our family. Their entire world, their country club memberships, their sprawling homes, their philanthropic galas where Marcus would drone on about generations of integrity. It was all funded by the bloody, violent, and decidedly illegal activities of a pirate. The hypocrisy was a physical weight. I felt it pressing down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. What was I supposed to do? I could burn the chart, pretend I never saw it, and go on being the family's gentle, eccentric failure. Or, I could do something else. The thought was still unformed, a shadow at the edge of my mind. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about the sheer staggering injustice of it all. To understand the weight of that moment, you have to understand the history wasn't just in the chart, it was in my own life. The ridicule wasn't a new phenomenon. It was the bedrock of my relationship with Marcus's side of the family. I remember being 10 years old, so proud of a map I had drawn of my own neighborhood. I'd spent weeks on it, meticulously detailing every house, every tree, every fire hydrant. I showed it to Uncle Marcus at a family barbecue. He glanced at it for a second, a flicker of something that might have been annoyance in his eyes. He handed it back to me. "That's nice, Joel," he said, his voice dripping with dismissive patronage. "But look over there." He pointed to the driveway, where Leo, who was 12, was polishing the hood of a brand new miniature ATV his father had just bought him. Leo's learning about engines, real things. Things that build empires. Try to focus on something useful, boy. I remember folding my map into a tight little square, my cheeks burning, and hiding it in my pocket. That dynamic never changed. When it was time for college, I was ecstatic. I had been accepted into a prestigious history program, with a focus on archival studies and cartography. It was my dream. I told my parents, and they were happy for me, until they talked to Marcus. I wasn't there for the conversation, but I saw the aftermath. My father, a good man but a weak one, sat me down in our living room, the smell of my mother's anxious pot roast hanging in the air. "Joel," he started. Unable to meet my eye. "Marcus thinks, we think that maybe a business degree would be more practical. The company, there's always a place for you at the company." I was devastated. It was a betrayal. He was asking me to kill a part of myself to appease my uncle. When I refused, the financial support my parents had promised for my education evaporated. Marcus had convinced them it would be enabling my fantasies. So I did it myself. I worked 3 jobs, library assistant, late-night diner cook, and weekend landscaper. I took out loans. I ate ramen noodles, and lived in a shoebox apartment, but I got my degree. Meanwhile, Leo sailed through his MBA program, his tuition and lavish lifestyle, fully funded by Marcus. I heard he barely scraped by, that he'd paid other students to write half his papers, but he got the diploma. And at his graduation party, a lavish affair at the yacht club, Marcus gave a toast, praising his son's sharp mind and dedication, the heir apparent. I was there, standing in the back in my ill-fitting second-hand suit, feeling like a ghost. The final erasure came 2 years ago, at the 100th anniversary gala for Cormac Shipping. It was a black tie event, the pinnacle of Marcus's social calendar. The governor was there, senators, the city's old money elite. Marcus took the stage, bathed in a spotlight, and delivered a 20-minute speech. He waxed lyrical about Alistair Cormac's unimpeachable integrity and unwavering commitment to honest ethical trade. He talked about building a legacy for generations of Cormacs to come. He thanked his son Leo for being ready to carry the torch. He never once mentioned my father, his own brother, who worked a quiet middle management job in the company's logistics department his entire life. He never mentioned my grandfather. He certainly never mentioned me. It was as if our entire branch of the family tree had been pruned away to make the main trunk look stronger. I stood there, clutching a glass of cheap champagne, and realized that in the official history of the Cormac family, I didn't exist. I was thinking about all of this, the decades of quiet cuts and grand humiliations, as I stared at the pirate log on my table. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my reverie. It was an unknown number. I answered, and my uncle's voice, that familiar condescending baritone, filled my ear. He didn't even say hello. "Joel, your mother tells me you wasted a good chunk of your savings on another dusty relic at some pauper's sale." His tone was a mixture of pity and irritation. "Listen, I've been thinking. It's time you grew up. There's an opening in the mailroom at the main office. Real work. A steady paycheck. It's time you learned what a real legacy looks like, Joel. It's time you joined the real world." Something inside me snapped. It was a clean, quiet break. The years of resentment, the fresh, raw wound of the anniversary speech, the sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of this man, it all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. He was offering me a job in his mailroom, in a building paid for with pirate gold, while lecturing me on legacy. He was trying to shape my reality, to force me into the little box he'd built for me, the box labeled family failure. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to stay in it. I had the truth, and the truth was a weapon. I held the phone to my ear and listened to him drone on about responsibility and family duty, and a slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. "Thank you for the offer, Uncle," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'll give it some thought." I hung up the phone. The time for thought was over. The time for action had begun. The first step was to move beyond awe and anger and into methodical precision. My passion for history wasn't just a hobby. It was a discipline. I knew that a fantastic claim required unimpeachable evidence. For the next 2 weeks, my apartment transformed from a quiet refuge into a forensic lab. I spent hours hunched over the chart, meticulously translating every word of Calico Cormac's spidery, ciphered script. It was a mix of a phonetic code, 17th century naval slang, and personal shorthand. It was a puzzle, and it was the most alive I'd ever felt. I documented everything. I took high-resolution, multi-spectrum photographs of the chart, capturing the vellum's texture, the faded trade route ink, and of course the glowing secrets of the pirate's log. I transcribed the entire journal into a searchable digital document, cross-referencing nautical terms and historical events to verify its authenticity. The log wasn't just about treasure, it was a detailed chronicle of a brutal life. It detailed betrayals, storms, and the mundane horrors of life on a pirate vessel. It was a priceless historical artifact, but I knew I was too close to it. My emotions were tangled up in the ink and vellum. I needed an objective eye, an expert who could see this not as family drama, but as what it was, a major historical find. I called my old friend Ben Carter. Ben and I had been through the historical studies program together. While I had carved out a niche as a freelance researcher, Ben had gone the academic route and was now a respected maritime historian and a consultant on maritime law. He had a brilliant analytical mind and a healthy cynicism for tall tales. I met him at a quiet pub near the university, a place that smelled of old books and stale beer. I didn't tell him everything over the phone, just that I had found something he needed to see. I slid a folder across the sticky table. It contained a set of high-quality prints of the chart under both normal and UV light, along with my initial transcription. Ben opened it, his curiosity piqued. He looked at the first photo, a polite smile on his face. Then he flipped to the UV shot. His smile vanished. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the page, then the next, and the next. For a full 5 minutes, he was silent, completely absorbed. The only sound was the clinking of glasses from the bar and the low murmur of student conversations. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes wide. "Joel," he whispered, his voice hoarse with excitement. "Where in God's name did you get this?" I told him everything. The estate sale, the black light, the name Cormac, my uncle, the family myth. He listened patiently, his gaze fixed on me, his expression shifting from academic curiosity to a deep, personal concern for his friend. When I finished, he leaned back in his booth and let out a low whistle. "Good God, Joel. This is the kind of thing historians dream of finding. This isn't just a log. If this is authentic, and my gut tells me it is, it's a Rosetta Stone for piracy in this specific period and region." He paused, tapping a finger on a particular photo. But you know this is more than that, don't you? This is dynamite. That's when he started to connect the dots in a way I hadn't. He looked at my transcription of the entry about the scuttled Spanish galleon, the Serpent's Coil. Wait a minute, he said, pulling out his phone and tapping furiously. The Serpent's Coil. That's not just a random ship, it's a semi-legendary wreck. It was rumored to be carrying unminted silver from the Potosi mines. People have been searching for it for centuries. He looked up from his phone, his face grim. And I know for a fact that Poseidon Salvage, a huge commercial outfit, has been surveying an area off the coast of Nevis for the past year. The wreck has never been officially identified, but the whispers are that they're close. My blood ran cold. Poseidon Salvage, my uncle's company, has a logistics contract with them, a big one. Ben's eyes lit up with a fierce, protective fire. Then that's your leverage, Joel. It's brilliant. It's a two-pronged attack. He began to lay it out for me, his voice low and urgent. First, the history. The truth about Calico Cormac. That's the weapon against your uncle's reputation. But the second part, the Serpent's Coil, that's the financial and legal checkmate. He explained the basics of maritime salvage law. Under the principle of admiralty arrest, the first party to discover and file a legitimate claim on a wreck has superior rights. The chart, with its specific centuries-old coordinates, was an unassailable discovery document. You can file a preliminary claim, a salvage arrest on the Serpent's Coil, Ben explained. It would legally force Poseidon Salvage to halt their operations immediately. They'd have to negotiate with you. And when your uncle's business partner calls him to ask why his multi-million-dollar expedition has been shut down by a claim from a shell corporation that leads back to his own nephew, well, the fireworks will be spectacular. The plan was audacious, and it was terrifying. But Ben's validation was the final piece I needed. He saw it. He understood. This isn't just you getting petty revenge, Joel, he said, his hand on my shoulder. This is you claiming your own history. Your family stole the narrative and wrote you out of it. This is you writing it back in. He helped me set up a numbered company, a legal entity to act as a shield, and he put me in touch with a sharp, discreet maritime lawyer who owed him a favor. The pieces were moving. While the legal gears were turning, I did some digging of my own. I wanted to understand the state of the empire I was about to confront. It wasn't hard to find information on my cousin Leo. His attempts to be a venture capitalist were a matter of public record, a trail of collapsed LLCs and flashy startups that burned through cash before disappearing. I found liens filed against his ridiculously overpriced condo and a string of angry articles on tech blogs about his failed cryptocurrency platform, Lioncoin. He was a walking disaster, a financial black hole propped up entirely by Marcus's money. He wasn't just the golden boy, he was the family's secret expensive liability. The pressure on my uncle wasn't just about his reputation, it was about keeping his son's catastrophic failures under wraps. This whole time they had looked down on me for my modest, stable life, while their own prince was drowning in debt and incompetence. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. The plan was no longer just a reaction, it was a strategy. A quiet, meticulous, and devastatingly complete strategy. The first move was about to be made, not with a roar but with a whisper. The first step of the plan was designed to be silent, almost academic. It had to be untraceable back to me, at least initially. I drafted a careful, anonymous email. The persona I adopted was that of a retired amateur historian who had stumbled upon a significant document and wished to share it with the academic community without seeking personal glory. It was a plausible cover, the kind of thing that happens once or twice a decade in the world of historical research. To this email, I attached a curated selection of the evidence, high-resolution photographs of the chart showing Calico Cormac's log entries, my detailed transcription and translation, and a short, scholarly analysis of its potential significance. I was careful to select entries that established the pirate's identity and activities but omitted the most damning family connections and, crucially, any mention of the Serpent's Coil. This was bait, not the whole hook. I sent the package to two places, the head of the Maritime History Department at a major university known for its rivalry with Ben's institution, and a highly respected, slightly sensationalist archaeology blog called The History Hunter. The rivalry would ensure the university took it seriously, and the blog would ensure it reached a wider, more public audience. Then I clicked send and closed my laptop. The first stone had been tossed into the pond. For a week there was silence. It was a nerve-wracking time. I checked my anonymous email account a dozen times a day. I scanned academic forums and history websites, looking for any ripples. Nothing. I started to doubt myself. Maybe the email had been dismissed as a crank. Maybe the evidence wasn't as compelling as I thought. I was sitting in my apartment, the silence amplifying my anxiety, when my phone buzzed with a text from Ben. It was just a link. I clicked it. The headline on the History Hunter blog read, "Exclusive newly discovered 17th century pirate log could rewrite Caribbean history." My heart leaped into my throat. The article was explosive. It featured my photographs, credited to an anonymous source, and breathlessly detailed the life of the previously unknown Captain Calico Cormac. It was everything I had hoped for. The comments section was already a frenzy of speculation from amateur historians, wreck divers, and genealogy buffs. The ripple was turning into a wave. 2 days later, the university, not wanting to be scooped, issued a press release confirming they were examining the Cormac paper and calling them a find of extraordinary significance. The name Cormac was out there now, but still floating in the abstract, a historical curiosity. Now it was time for the second move. With the academic buzz as a backdrop, Ben's lawyer filed the Admiralty arrest paperwork for the Serpent's Coil. We filed it through the numbered company, Nautilus Historical Ventures. The claim was airtight, citing the precise coordinates from the 17th century chart as the basis for the discovery. The legal system, in its slow, methodical way, processed the claim. An injunction was issued. In a sterile office somewhere in a coastal port authority, a clerk stamped a piece of paper, and with that single act, the multi-million-dollar salvage operation of Poseidon Salvage ground to a halt. This time, I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. The call didn't come to me. It went, as Ben had predicted, directly to my uncle. I found out later what happened. The CEO of Poseidon Salvage, a man named Peterson, called Marcus in an absolute fury. They were on the verge of a massive discovery, and suddenly they were being blocked by a ghost company with an impossibly accurate claim. Peterson accused Marcus's company of leaking intel, of corporate espionage. Marcus, of course, was completely blindsided. He promised Peterson he would crush this upstart company. He put his own legal team on it, telling them to spare no expense in finding out who was behind Nautilus Historical Ventures. The panic began to cascade. Marcus was a man who craved control above all else, and for the first time in his life he was fighting a shadow. His lawyers hit brick wall after brick wall. My shell company was designed by experts to be opaque. While he was fuming, trying to solve this business crisis, another one was brewing in his own home. Leo, seeing the storm clouds gathering around his father, made his move. He came to Marcus with a sob story about a temporary cash flow problem with his latest disastrous venture. He needed a bailout, and not a small one. He needed 7 figures to prevent his creditors from suing him into oblivion, a move that would create a very public, very embarrassing scandal for the Cormac family. So now my uncle was fighting a two-front war. His most important business partnership was in jeopardy. His reputation for competence was on the line, and his perfect son was revealed to be a financial millstone around his neck. He was trapped, bleeding money and prestige, and he had no idea that the architect of his misery was the nephew he had dismissed as a feckless hobbyist. The quiet takeover was complete. All that was left was for him to realize it. The pressure on my uncle began to manifest in ugly ways. The family, which had always run on the fuel of his approval, started to sputter and seize. My father told me, in a hushed, worried phone call, that Marcus was a thundercloud of rage, striding through the offices of Cormac Shipping, barking at assistants, and tearing strips off of senior executives for minor infractions. He was paranoid, convinced there was a traitor in his organization, someone who had leaked the location of the Serpent's Coil. He was hemorrhaging money on legal fees, trying to break my salvage claim, and simultaneously trying to discreetly pay off Leo's massive debts to avoid public humiliation. The carefully constructed facade of the calm, powerful patriarch was cracking, revealing the panicked, insecure man beneath. Meanwhile, the story of Calico Cormac was taking on a life of its own. The university had authenticated the ink and vellum, and the history professor I had leaked it to, a man named Dr. Alistair Finch, the irony of the first name was not lost on me, was becoming a minor celebrity. He gave a public lecture, which was streamed online, titled Calico Cormac, the Pirate in the Ledger. He speculated openly about the pirate's origins, noting that the name Cormac was prominent in the shipping trade in the very same region a generation later. He didn't make a direct link. He didn't have to. He just planted the seed, posing the question to a captivated audience: could it be that one of the great legitimate shipping fortunes of the New World was in fact built on a pirate's treasure? History is so often a matter of laundering the truth. That was the tipping point. The lecture was shared in the alumni newsletters and social circles that my family inhabited. The whispers started. At the country club, old family friends would ask Marcus with a sly grin if he was related to the famous pirate. At first he would laugh it off, a forced, brittle sound. But the questions kept coming. The myth he had polished for 50 years was being tarnished by a truth he couldn't control. The name that was once a symbol of integrity was now becoming a punchline. It was then that he must have finally made the connection. My hobby. My useless passion for old maps. My quiet defiance. It all clicked into place in his paranoid mind. The final catalyst was a call he received from his lawyer, who after weeks of expensive work, had finally managed to pierce the corporate veil of Nautilus Historical Ventures. He had my name. The summons came via a text message from my mother. Family meeting. Your uncle's house. Sunday at noon. Please, Joel. It's important. The pleading tone in her text was thick. I knew what this was. This was not an invitation. It was a subpoena. It was Marcus's last-ditch attempt to regain control, to drag me back into the family court, where he was the judge, jury, and executioner. He thought he could corner me, intimidate me, and force me back into my box. He was preparing his usual arsenal of guilt, condescension, and emotional manipulation. Leo, desperate, and seeing his last chance at a bailout slipping away, would be his rabid attack dog. My parents would be the distressed collateral damage, begging me to think of the family and not ruin everything. They were all preparing for the same old drama, the same old script where I was the villain who had to be brought to heel. They had no idea I had rewritten the entire play. The drive to my uncle's house felt different this time. For years I had made this trip with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, bracing myself for the inevitable condescension and criticism. Today, I felt nothing but a cold, calm certainty. I was not driving to my execution. I was driving to a business negotiation, and I held all the cards. The house was a monument to his ego, a sprawling neo-colonial mansion overlooking the water, a testament to the honest trade of our ancestors. I walked up the stone path, the same path I had shuffled up so many times as a child, feeling small and insignificant. Not today. I walked into the formal living room. It was a scene straight out of a stage play. Marcus stood by the massive stone fireplace, his back rigid. Leo was pacing near the window, his face a mask of furious resentment. My mother and father were sitting together on a love seat, looking small and terrified. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. Marcus turned as I entered. He didn't offer me a seat. He launched straight into the attack. Well, he began, his voice laced with venom. The little historian, playing with his maps. Did you really think you could get away with this, Joel? Trying to extort your own family? Trying to destroy a legacy that good men spent their lives building? Leo spun around, his face red with anger. It's pathetic. You were always jealous. Jealous of me, jealous of Dad. You couldn't make it in the real world, so you decided to try and tear ours down. He took a step towards me, his fists clenched. You think you're going to get a penny? You're going to get nothing. My parents just watched, their faces etched with worry. My mother whispered my name. Joel, please. I let them vent. I stood there in the center of the room, my hands in my pockets, and I listened. I let the storm of their anger and fear break over me. For years, words like these would have wounded me, made me shrink. Now they were just noise. The desperate howling of people who knew, deep down, they had lost. When they finally paused, breathless, I met my uncle's gaze. My voice when I spoke was quiet, calm, and utterly devoid of the emotion they expected. I'm not here for money, Uncle, I said simply. The statement hung in the air, confusing them. It wasn't the move they had anticipated. Then what is this? Marcus spat. A childish tantrum. No, I said. It's a history lesson. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out 2 documents. I walked to the polished mahogany coffee table and placed them side by side. The first, I said, tapping a slim folder, is a courtesy copy of the upcoming paper from Dr. Finch at the university, the one about Calico Cormac. He's still trying to trace the lineage. He called me yesterday, as the registered owner of the chart, to ask if I had any insights into any prominent shipping families with the same name originating from the same area. I told him I'd look into it. Marcus went pale. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. Leo looked confused, not yet grasping the full implication. The second document, I continued, sliding a thicker sheaf of legal papers next to the first, is the full unredacted Admiralty claim for the wreck of the Serpent's Coil. My claim. My name is on page 5, as the sole director of the holding company. Poseidon Salvage's lawyers have already offered me a 7-figure settlement to release my claim. I haven't responded yet. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the frantic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Leo's jaw had gone slack. My parents looked from the papers to my face, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Marcus stared at the documents, as if they were venomous snakes. He finally understood. It was checkmate. You see, Uncle, I said, my voice still level, you've made a critical mistake. You thought your power came from your money, from this house, from the company name, but it doesn't. Your power came from a story, a myth, and I own the truth. If you fight my salvage claim, you will have to explain in a court of law how I knew the exact location of a 17th century wreck. The press will connect it to the Cormac papers at the university. The story will no longer be about a long-lost pirate. It will be about you. About the CEO of Cormac Shipping, the descendant of a brutal buccaneer whose family legacy is a fraud. Your unimpeachable integrity will become a joke. I let that sink in. Or, I continued, you can let the claim stand. You can explain to your business partners that you were outmaneuvered by your disappointment of a nephew. You lose the money, you lose the prestige, you lose face. But maybe, just maybe, the story stays contained. Your choice. Leo finally exploded. Not with rage, but with a desperate, pathetic plea. Dad, just pay him. Give him whatever he wants. My creditors are going to ruin me. Marcus didn't even look at his son. His eyes were locked on mine, filled with a horrified, defeated understanding. The powerful patriarch was gone. In his place was just an old man, who had seen his world crumble. I told you, I said, looking from Marcus to Leo. It was never about the money. I turned to my uncle. This is what's going to happen. You are going to publicly amend the official history of this family. You will fund a historical preservation grant, administered by Dr. Finch's department, to study the life and times of Captain Calico Cormac, our true ancestor. You will tell the truth, not the polished lie, but the whole messy, bloody truth. And then you and your son, and the rest of this family, will leave me completely and utterly alone. You will never comment on my life, my work, or my passions again. I stood there for a moment, letting the terms of his surrender settle in the suffocating silence. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the house, leaving the ruins of their mythology behind me. In the months that followed, the world shifted. My uncle, a broken man, complied with my every demand. He issued a public statement, couched in the language of new historical discoveries, acknowledging the family's more complex and colorful origins. He quietly established the Calico Cormac Historical Grant. The story became a sensation, but not in the way Marcus had ever wanted. The Cormac name was more famous than ever, but its meaning had been irrevocably changed. They were no longer the stoic self-made magnates. They were the pirates' kin. The transition was brutal for Marcus. His carefully manicured social standing evaporated. Some of his old money peers were amused. Others were appalled. He was no longer the pillar of the community. He was a historical curiosity with a tainted legacy. Leo didn't fare any better. Without his father's endless river of cash to bail him out, his creditors descended. His condo was sold at auction, his sports car was repossessed, and he was forced to declare bankruptcy. I heard from my father that he got a job, a real one, as a junior sales associate at a boating supply company. The golden boy had finally been forced to learn how to swim on his own. My parents were caught in the awkward middle. They were ashamed, confused but also, in a strange way, relieved. The pressure to live up to Marcus's impossible standards was gone. Our relationship is still strained, but we're talking. Really talking, for the first time in years. As for me, I sold the salvage rights to the Serpent's Coil for a sum of money that was frankly life-changing. But the money was never the point. It was a byproduct, a fortunate consequence. I used a portion of it to set up my own historical consultancy firm, specializing in document authentication and maritime history. I bought a small house on the coast, with a big airy workshop for my maps and my charts. My passion, the thing they ridiculed for my entire life, has become my profession. The dusty, useless hobby has given me a freedom they could never have understood. I'm sitting in that workshop now, looking out at the ocean. The original chart of Calico Cormac is framed on my wall, under museum-grade UV protective glass. It's a reminder. They say the truth will set you free, but they never tell you that first it has to burn down the prison you've been living in. My family built their identity on a lie, and used it as a cage for everyone around them. They worshipped a story more than they loved their own family. My uncle thought legacy was something you build with steel and stone and press releases. He never understood that a real legacy is the truth you're willing to tell. It wasn't about the treasure hidden in the sea, it was about the truth hidden in the ink. That was the real Cormac fortune. And I was the one who finally decided to cash it in. So I have to ask you, did I go too far? Was it my right to tear down a century of my family's history, even if that history was a lie? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you ever had a passion that someone else dismissed, only to have it become your greatest strength? I'd love to hear your story, and if you enjoyed this one, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. Thanks for listening.